Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them. On the 20th of November 2003, James Ignatius O'Rourke McMahon was elected councillor for the Failsworth East Ward of Oldham. Deeply ambitious, he ruthlessly rose to power, and by 2011, he was already leader of the council. In 2015, exploiting a Labour Party loophole, he became MP for Oldham West and Royton. If only the people of the town knew then what they now know. Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them.
Very, very good evening. Sunday the 13th of October 2024. My name is Raj Amir. This is one of those subscriber-only Recusants here, only Recusant 9 transmissions. I sent the link out, I think, about 8 o'clock, and also on the private messenger group. So hopefully everyone who is supposed to be here is here, and those of you who are here and aren't supposed to be here, then perhaps you'd consider subscribing to the right tier membership. Where do we start? It's been a genuinely landmark week for the history of Oldham and for the history of our work, because something completely unprecedented has happened, and it's happened triggered by something that's taken place in Tameside. Now, there's been issues bubbling away in Tameside for a while, and my friends in Tameside, those of you who know me know I live in Mosley. I actually live in Tameside at the moment. My friends in Tameside for some time have been asking me to look into Tameside and spend more time on issues in Tameside, and I haven't, for a couple of reasons. One is because I don't know it as well as Oldham. There's not a part of Oldham I don't know, and Tameside I'm not so well versed in it. It's not somewhere where I was born or raised or grew up in really somewhere that's taken me in and given me refuge, if anything. So for that, I'm grateful to Mosley and the surrounding areas. My other reason, and the main reason why I haven't, is because my focus has been on Oldham, and there's been so much to do on Oldham. But it doesn't mean I've not been unaware or not keeping up to date on issues in Tameside. It was first really brought to my attention by my friend Liam Billington. He's a councillor. And Liam Billington is one of the very, very few, he's a Conservative councillor, he's one of the very, very few councillors. Conservative, he's actually the only Conservative councillor, well, not the only one, maybe one or two. He's definitely the only Conservative councillor who on these transmissions has openly supported me. And those of you who follow the free-to-air work will see Liam regularly would post and say hello and pass on his regards. So in that way, he is completely fearless and has been fearless for some time. Now, Liam first approached me during lockdown, and just after lockdown he was very supportive of me. He was very supportive of me when Greater Manchester Police attempted to maliciously prosecute me, when essentially they attempted to frame me. And he came to me with a couple of stories that caused me alarm, really, because they were being brought to me independently by a councillor who's a very, very decent man. The first one was how the police were involved in attempting to prosecute him, and how that case collapsed because of a recording he had. But secondly, and more worryingly, was how the police threatened him. That's Greater Manchester Police threatened him when he raised the issue of CSC, the Pakistani rape gangs, in Tameside. And Tameside's figures officially, as a consequence of some Freedom of Information requests, I think, and some data released in a council meeting in a bundle hidden away, the figures there were worse than they had been in anything released in Oldham. So we know that these gangs operated with impunity across county lines. Only an idiot would want to suggest otherwise. We now know they operated in Manchester. Remember 96, 97 taxi drivers or members of a gang were let loose, ignored by Greater Manchester Police, forced out of them now. They inexplicably closed down an investigation. My understanding, my belief is they closed down that investigation because who they were investigating, who were members of that gang. And I would go as far as to say there was probably politicians, Labour Party politicians, and their family members were members of that gang. I genuinely believe that. There's a reason why the police shut that down. And remember, Greater Manchester Police could not find, or the investigation that took place could not find the minutes of the meeting where it was agreed for that to be shut down. Neither the police could produce the minutes of the meeting nor the council. Manchester Council could produce, and no one wants to talk about it. We know this gang was linked to Rochdale. We know the Rochdale gangs were linked to Kirklees, Halifax, Rotherham, South Yorkshire. And we know Oldham, Thameside were just, other shop fronts. Let's call them that. Shop fronts for this network of predominantly Pakistani men who operated along tribal lines and were protected because of who they voted for and who they had influence over. I'm regularly asked by people, well, why don't you go on GB News or Talk TV or those platforms? They won't have me on because of, one, how I rationally communicate this, how I explain this, and it takes it to a place away from the generic let's bash the Muslims or let's bash the Asians and let's pander to some of that casual racism, because I take it away from that. And I'm clear from the outset that these are racially motivated crimes, and I can articulate why they are, but I also articulate that these are more than just racially motivated crimes. We need to look at not just the people who committed the crimes, but those who protected those who committed the crimes. And that's why I was angry and remain angry as to how Councillor Mark Hinds, that's the dress-up Nazi, the Zig Heiling dress-up Nazi, and Lisa Navesey, and Brian Hoban, and Councillor Neil Hindle, all four of them voted to block a genuine call for a public inquiry, because that genuine call for a public inquiry included investigating those responsible for the cover-up. Because until we get to that, we will never deal with this issue. But it takes it to a very uncomfortable place. So when Liam raised it in a council meeting and he was shouted down, Greater Manchester Police phoned a Thameside councillor and threatened him. There's no ifs, there's no maybes, that's exactly what happened. A senior police officer from Greater Manchester Police phoned up a serving councillor and threatened him. So what's bubbling away in Thameside is at least comparable to what we've exposed in Oldham, but unfortunately Thameside doesn't have a group of people such as ourselves who are willing to risk ridicule, risk demonisation, risk being targeted unlawfully for speaking out. So it came as no surprise to me as to what was taking place and has taken place in Thameside. So let me take you back and bring this up. If you're finding value in this transmission, please do press like at the very least, and I will get this transmission recorded and I'll get it quickly edited and shared with those people on the £10 a month subscription tomorrow. So I'll get that done. So, if you go back to December 2022, this woman, Sandra Stewart, was the new boss chosen after chief executive quit That's the last chief executive, and there's a motion of no confidence being put together, again by Liam Billington and his team, and he quit. The previous chief executive quit, and this woman was brought in, Sandra Stewart. And let's read it. It's in the BBC. You can see it's in the BBC News. And let's give it. So Stephen Pleasant, MBE, stepped down after posting the tweet before the recent local elections from his official work account. Now we know the likes of Harry Cafferel have done worse in supporting Arud Shah and becoming politically, crossing that line and becoming politically active. So the tweet he posted was this one. It breached legislation. She was good, Tory voter with compassion and empathy for others. Who knew? So Stephen Pleasant's anti-conservative rhetoric came out on a tweet, and he was forced to quit. So he was replaced by Sandra Stewart, permanent chief executive. She had been filling the role on an interim basis. See how they bring in these people on an interim basis? And what that genuinely means is without due process. This is what the borough solicitor currently is. That's Alexander Bogatov, the backdoor borough solicitor, personal appointment of Harry Cafferel. So Sandra Stewart, interim basis, moves in. Miss Stewart had worked at Tameside Council since 1994 under the role of borough solicitor and deputy chief executive before becoming director of governance. So she'd been in the council at a senior level as borough solicitor since 1994, so 20 years more or less. But she was promoted internally. Do you see? Internally. To have the skills and experiences to operate at that level, was not independently vetted, independently recruited, just appointed. Safe pair of hands, someone we know, someone who's helped manage the situation internally, so we can continue the relationship. And council leader Jed Cooney had said the council is facing an unprecedented financial situation caused by the post-pandemic recovery. That's absolute nonsense. The cost of living crisis and the spiralling energy costs, well, that's got nothing to do with the council's issues, but you know, Tameside has the same issues that most Labour Party-run councils have around financial mismanagement. So I am pleased that we'll all be working in partnership with Sandra to get us through this, as she shares our vision to make a difference for the people of Tameside. Miss Stewart said, I am committed to ensuring that what we do every day will make it a better place for everyone to live, learn and work. And this is her. So she comes in December 22 after a short period of on an interim basis. Sounding familiar? The 9th of October 2024. A council in crisis as children suffer. It is no longer acceptable to be where we are. There's a picture of Duckenfield Town Hall. Shockwaves rippled through Tameside Council as the chief executive quit amid a children's services fiasco. Last month, the government was told the authority doesn't have the capacity or capability to improve the directorate without oversight and support. Children's services in Tameside have been weak for too long, a commissioner wrote. Following the latest meeting of the full council on Tuesday, October the 8th, it emerged Chief Executive Sandra Stewart had stepped down from a £184,767 a year job. I'll say that again, £184,767 a year job after nearly 2 years. She will become Chief Executive of the Greater Manchester Pension Fund, she announced. So in Sue Gray style, they take care of each other and they continue to take care of each other. Or am I being unfair in that analysis? Town Hall bosses insist funding her replacement will not detract, finding her replacement will not detract from the main job at hand, improving the Children's Services Department. The council received an inadequate rating from Ofsted in February, the second in 5 years. So second in 5 years, Ofsted was in February. Now it's October. Clearly some update took place with the commissioner and they're not improving. Children's services in the borough had been failing since 2011. So this predates Sandra Stewart. What this shows is something institutional, something organisational, something beyond one person. Councillor Cooney, who promised change under his leadership, added, "We would certainly thank Sandra for the work she has done for this borough. It's her choice to stand down and we accept that. Now it's time to move on." So a commissioner's report to the government published in September, prompted by the persistent inadequacy of children's services, was scathing. It called for better leadership, recruitment and training. The council has neither enabled good services nor had mechanisms in place to spot service failures. There is a reluctance to accept responsibility collectively and corporately for the long-term service failure. A review of previous Ofsted recommendations and areas for improvement highlight weaknesses in political, corporate and senior leadership. The council, corporate and political, is quick to blame for failure individuals, frontline staff, partners, advisors, government departments. There is far less reflection as to its own role to enable successful service delivery, know how services are performing, deliver tailored corporate support, or recognise its collective accountability. Children's service failure does not happen in a vacuum. High-performing councils deliver strong services. So Hyde and Stalybridge MP, Jonathan Reynolds, Angela Rayner and Andrew Gwynn. So two of them are in the cabinet, Reynolds and Rayner. Welcomed. And this is where most of you first heard about it. Trouble in Angela Rayner's backyard as Labour Party sent official to fix crisis hit council. So this is where it gets murky. Labour is sending party officials to Angela Rayner's backyard in a move that could see her local council leader ousted. Now remember, there's a council chief executive and there's also a council leader. So what you have, in the way a council works, is the council leader. So we have Arooj Shah, for instance, and then there's a council chief executive. This one is elected. We vote on that, and this one is appointed. Now what generally happens when a government department comes in, such as Ofsted, and finds failings in council services, it recognises faults here and faults here. And it has recognised them. It says it's either got the leadership or the operational capability. Yeah, we talked about both political and policy. So political, and these are the policy makers. Okay. What's now happened, completely unprecedented in my opinion, is that the Labour Party, not the government, the Labour Party, sorry, let me just, are sending in a task force. So So if the Labour Party send in the task force, that task force can only be political. It can actually only look at the mechanisms, the issues in the Labour Party in Tameside. Yet here we have the failings. The failings are on the council, the policy makers. And we know they are because the chief executive is the first to quit. So what is taking place here is a Labour Party task force is coming in. So the question is why? Why is a Labour Party task force being sent in? And I think that's the question I need to answer and make sure you understand. And they're calling it a campaign improvement board to bring about the culture change that they need here. Let me bring this back up so you can see it. The National Party has accused Tameside Council's ruling Labour group of unacceptable working practice. After a series of damning reports into children's services, a campaign improvement board will now be set up to bring about the cultural change needed. It follows the departure of the council chief executive Sandra Stewart. All three MPs have welcomed the resignation. So they'd all been calling for Miss Stewart's departure beforehand. And like they say, it could result in a change of political leadership. And it did. So council leader Jed Cooney, who'd come in after Brenda had been removed, so I just need to find it. Here we go. What followed was the leader, Jed Cooney, stepped down with immediate effect after 4 of his senior councillors stood down from the executive posts on Thursday. So 5 of the Labour Party executive political leaders stood down, including the leader of the council. So 5 of them stood down immediately. And Conservative councillor Liam Billington told BBC Radio Manchester the Labour group in Tameside were in such disarray and chaos, adding he felt they were no longer fit for purpose. I think that's very clear. But a Labour spokesman said a campaign improvement board was being sent to intervene and oversee immediate changes within the council's Labour group. Okay. So Roger, what are you wittering on about? What should now be happening in Tameside, where the leader has quit, 4 of his senior members have quit, where the National Party has seen a problem enough to send in a task force, and the chief executive of the council has resigned, and commissioners have identified systematic failings in safeguarding children. What should be happening is a government task force should be going in, not a political task force. And a government task force going in would have far-reaching powers to run this failing council, and it would inadvertently expose all of the political shenanigans, wrongdoing, sleaze, scandals, brown envelopes, rape gangs. It would expose all of that. So Angela Rayner, Jonathan Reynolds, deputy leader of the Labour Party, is helping muddying the water here, because a government task force should go in independent of the politicians so they can fix this council, and that a government task force is not going in should worry everyone, not just in Tameside but in any other Labour Party running this council in this country, because what it shows is the Labour Party's desire, commitment, complicity in aiding, covering up corruption, covering up criminality, covering up corporate failure on an industrial scale. And this newspaper report first came out through the Manchester Evening News so they could manage the story. And they rely on your ignorance, the ignorance of the majority of people, not to be able to differentiate between political intervention into the party and policy intervention into those who actually are paid to run the council. Honestly, a government task force should be going in, not a Labour Party cover-up team. And no one's queried it. And in the main, it's because they didn't understand, or they don't understand the difference. And these people rely on your ignorance to get away with what they do. So that's the first thing you need to understand as to what's taken place. Secondly, and there we have it, Ian. So this cover-up council, aided by the Labour Party, nationally, now need a compliant chief executive who will aid and abet what's taking place. Harry Caffrell, so we're very clear, is involved in the cover-up of the grooming and gang rape of little white girls in our town as a chief executive. It was his officer, Gerard Jones, who did what he did, as exposed in Andy Burnham's report. Harry Caffrell would have known that, and when he knew about it, if he didn't know that, he had the power as a chief executive to act, and he didn't. Harry Caffrell is the one who went around first time round, holding Arooj Shah's hand, having all of these debates in the various wards, trying to help PR spin her. Harry Caffrell is the one who forced a recount when we've beat her fair and square in Chadderton South, even though the vote difference in votes did not merit a recount. He shouted at Lewis Quick and forced a recount. Harry Caffrell is the man who repeatedly oversteps his mark in the full council meetings. Harry Caffrell is the man who facilitated the negotiations, political negotiations, between the Nazi, the fraudster, and the gangsters mob. Harry Caffrell knows all about Irishimi, yet still allows Irishimi, a convicted gangster, to walk around the election, the Queen Elizabeth before that election times, even though he was convicted in the morning. Last time he was there. Harry Caffrell, is the man who would have been responsible for the CCTV footage and aiding Mark Hints in trying to smear the Liberal Democrats, when what the Liberal Democrats released, which is recordings of the negotiations between Shah and hence was in the public interest. Harry Caffrell was involved in handing over £1 million to Oldham Athletic Football Club, as Harry Caffrell is now also involved in handing over the historic Tommyfield site to an academy chain that specialises in Muslim faith schools, of which he sits on the board. So that's who Harry Caffrell is. So who better than to move over to Tameside to manage what's taking place and help cover up and clean up what's taking place. Now, the problem for Harry Caffrell is that he has a job at Oldham Council. And I want to talk to you about his job at Oldham Council. He was scheduled to resign. No, let's go back to the beginning. Harry Caffrell came in on an interim basis. He was the only person interviewed. Does this now sound familiar? And they approved his appointment. He came in on an interim basis. And then they gave him a contract for 3 years. Then he announced his retirement. And Oldham Council embarked on a recruitment process for a new chief executive, a recruitment process that failed to secure anyone. So in a bizarre, completely unprecedented approach, this is a chief executive, this is the person at the top, remember? Harry Caffrell decided he was convinced by Shard to cancel his retirement, and he could come in on 3 days a week. I think the money on 3 days a week, even though he was probably working from home at least one of those days, wasn't enough for Caffrell. So he wanted to expand it to 4 days a week. So what happened on the 4th day was they decided that there was work that a chief executive should be doing at the Greater Manchester Combined Authority, not Oldham, at the GMCA, of stature and status. So we paid him for an extra day for that. Yes, Tony. In January 24, he was also extended for a further 2 years. My apologies. And then there was talk of his retirement. And what we've got is a part-time yo-yoing chief executive who probably spends maybe 2 days at best on Oldham affairs. In a challenging council such as ours, on the verge of bankruptcy with systematic failings across the board, we've got a part-time chief executive, and to make it worse, his successor, in Tameside style, they needed someone malleable, let's just say. Not someone with the stature, the experience, the skill set to operate at a leadership level. No, they needed someone malleable. And the malleable person was Emma Barton, who they'd brought over from Wigan, a failing council in Wigan, with a scandal behind her there. Now, Emma Barton comes in. I don't think she even applied for the job. And if she did, she definitely didn't get shortlisted. Someone somewhere, I would imagine Arud Shah and Harry Caffrell, like, who's malleable? Who will look the other way when Irish Jimmy comes along and pulls up outside in his Bentley? Who will look the other way when the community centre is sold days before an election? Who will help cover up the gang rape of those little insignificant white girls? So Emma Barton becomes some sort of YTS trainee chief executive. And Harry Caffrell is meant to stay on for 2 further years whilst Emma Barton develops the skill set necessary. And Arud Shah said, oh, this is the Oldham way of doing things. Well, if the Oldham way is continuing to cover up for Pakistani rape gangs, then yeah, I suppose it is the Oldham way of doing things. Emma Barton is quickly found wanting, and this woman from Manchester Council who comes across, Shelley Kipling, who's a comms officer essentially, suddenly starts flexing her muscles, threatening councillors. Councillor Lewis Quick sending aggressive emails after she's exposed for working closely with Irish Shimmy. Convicted heroin dealer, remember? Getaway dealer of a cop killer. Getaway driver, sorry, of a cop killer. I don't know if she's on mates rates for shisha bars. I don't know. And doner kebabs on a Saturday night. You'll have to ask Shelley Kipling that. He's involved in appointing Irish Shimmy as a community ambassador to police the streets and threatens a councillor for daring objecting against it. Shelley Kipling now is outmanoeuvring Emma Barton. And the one man who was actually capable of doing this job, the one decent Pakistani man I've met in any of this, Saeed Osman, who was deputy chief executive, quit and left. My information is he quit and left because of the corruption, the sleaze. And it was like something he'd never seen before, and he wanted nothing to do with it. So part-time Harry now suddenly is being confirmed as taking over in Tameside on a secondment basis. Council boss set to take over troubled town hall next door. Exclusive. Oldham Council chief executive is set to be seconded to Tameside after its own boss quit this week. Apparently, he's set to temporarily take over. Now, what's temporarily? Well, my understanding of how recruitments operate at a chief executive level, remember you need a sufficient notice period at the other end. It'll take at least 6 months from advertising. And this person will have to come in with their own team, so it'll take a year. No chief executive is going to come into a team, into a council like Tameside without bringing their own team in at different levels so they can operate cohesively, collectively, collaboratively. They trust each other. So he's not taking it on an interim basis, in my opinion. There's something more going on here. The Manchester Evening News understands Oldham Council Chief Executive is set to be seconded to Tameside on an interim basis whilst a permanent replacement is recruited. Mr. Caffrell is likely to split his time between the two councils, the MEN has been told. Well, told by who? Well, obviously, the MEN have been drafted in to help manage this story on behalf of the Labour Party, because the MEN goes all the way back to that woman Jennifer Williams and nothing but Labour Party stooges. They're not an independent newspaper. They are there to manage the news on behalf of the Labour Party. The Andy Burnham groupies. So, on what basis is Harry Caffrell going across? Remember, our part-time chief executive from Oldham going to Tameside. Who's approved it? Who's approved it? And this is what happens in a corrupt council, Gary. You've got to understand, when the chief executive has got dirt on the senior councillors and has protected them, then the chief executive and the senior policymakers expect favours in return. And I think this is what's taking place. Arud Shah knows there's no way she can justify a part-time council chief executive, already part-time, then spending half his time in a neighbouring local authority when we've not got the capacity underneath, because the town, our town, has lost many of its senior leaders. And I don't want Harry Caffrell here, by the way. I'm just demonstrating to you what's taking place here. So, Caffrell can't decide. The Labour Party can't and shouldn't decide, but we know, I've been told from insiders, that the person helping negotiate and support Tameside in dealing with this is our own Jim McMahon. James Ignatius or Rook McMahon. Why is Angela Rayner not good enough to deal with it? Jonathan Reynolds not good enough to deal with it? Why is McMahon getting involved? Oh, we know why, don't we? Because the Labour Party have blocked a public inquiry into what's taken place in Oldham. So, even then, before our chief executive is mooted as stepping in on an interim basis, two things should have happened. One is the councillors in Tameside surely should be voting on it or deciding whether they want this cover-up merchant from Oldham there. I don't want him here in Tameside. I don't want Caffrell in Tameside. My friend Liam Billington definitely doesn't want a councillor, a chief executive involved in helping cover up the grooming and gang rape of little white girls moving in to a town that's failing children. Oh yeah, in what world does that make sense? Unless you want him to continue doing what he's done in Oldham. In Tameside. And then on the other hand, surely this should be voted on or discussed with a clear intervention of, well, if it does go, what's our strategy? How are we going to manage it here? No, hasn't happened. What did happen was Oldham Council issued a press release and slipped the news in on Friday after Councillor Quigg had submitted something never done before, which is calling for an extraordinary council meeting. Article 4 of the council constitution. The appointments committee isn't scheduled to meet until the week after next. So clearly they've got something scheduled where they thought they were going to rubber stamp this. Or Caffrell thought he was going to rubber stamp this. But no, he can't. Just want to bring something up. And it's not made the news. It's made the Saddleworth Independent, which is bizarre. But it's not made the news. Saddleworth councillors face extraordinary Oldham authority meeting. And it tries to give it the Saddleworth basis of what's going on. Saddleworth, but it wasn't. So Councillor Quigg submitted an email on Friday invoking Article 4 of the Council Constitution. And for that to happen, 5 councillors need to agree with it to call an extraordinary council meeting. And the ones that supported him were his 2 Royton colleagues, and also Beth Sharp and Luke Lancaster. I think even Pam Byrne in the end also sent emails out supporting. So the Conservatives, well, Lewis has grown a set, as I said, you know, he's been leading this fight, hasn't he? Let's be honest, he's been leading the fight in the council chamber against these people. This is what he had to say. The mayor has advised that he is satisfied, that's Dr. Zaid Chawan, the mayor has, because they had no choice. The mayor has advised that he is satisfied that the request for meeting has been met and that steps to call an extraordinary meeting of the council will be called. He had no choice. Lewis understands the Constitution, found the relevant section in the Constitution, did what was required, and an extraordinary council meeting has now been called. My colleagues and I have taken this extraordinary decision in order to bring this from behind closed doors and into the public domain, which is where it should be. This is our chief executive. Who is he? Who does he think he is part-time? Cathral to go and so I'm going to now help out in Tameside. It is apparent that the collapse of a neighbouring Labour council is now impacting on Oldham. Councillors need to be able to ask questions with full transparency over what is happening. Mr. Cathral is the most senior officer in the council, and we need to know, given his already reduced role, that he is able to fully commit to the people of Oldham or not. There is no escaping the fact Oldham is in a mess, and it is not in a good place, and we need a full-time chief executive who can deal with this reality. Mr. Cathral needs to decide whether he is staying or going so he can begin to plan for the future. The halfway house situation we have now and going forward is not good enough. Mr. Cathral, who lives in Staler Bridge by the way, is stepping in at Tameside to help it through its current crisis. And then it goes on Labour's National Party's bringing a campaign improvement board. Like they don't understand when they do understand that it's not for the Labour Party to do that, to bring in and improve, to fix what's going on in Tameside. It's for the government to intervene and send in a task force. But we know that task force will expose things that the Labour Party don't want exposing, which is why I believe that Dirty Harry Cathral has been mobilised. Unfortunately for Harry Cathral, Lewis Quigg has invoked Article 4 of Oldham Council's constitution. The Conservatives have backed him, and an emergency extraordinary council meeting will take place. Now I know what's going to be discussed. You ready? Let me get a drink. Get yourself a drink. And I'll come back. I'll play some background music for you guys.
Too often, I'll say bare-faced lies. I'll I'll say bare-faced lies. I'll say bare-faced lies. Again, bare-faced lies. I'll say bare-faced lies. I'll say bare-faced lies. I'll say bare-faced lies. Again.
That's right, yeah, we got an agenda. And it's your money, we're gonna spend ya. You can put one where it's all gonna end ya. You can feel me, we never wanna defend ya. 'Cause when the truth becomes so easy to disguise, you get shooting cold, overgrown, postal phone, bare-faced lies.
Bare-faced lies. Bare-faced lies.
Hey Sean, you got a party, got that little party going on there. Keep to the left, you can't think right, so everything you do goes wrong, yeah. Incompetence just leads to disaster. Corruption brings it on even faster. What you say?
That's right, yeah, we got an agenda. And it's your money, we're gonna spend ya. You won't wonder where it's all gonna end ya. You feel me, we never wanna defend ya. 'Cause when the truth becomes so easy to disguise, you get shit cold, overgrown, postal phone, bare-faced. That's right, yeah, we got an agenda. And it's your money, we're gonna spend ya. You won't wonder where it's all gonna end ya. You feel me, we never wanna defend ya. 'Cause when the truth becomes so easy to disguise, you get shit cold, overgrown, postal phone, bare-faced lies.
Bare-faced lies. Bare-faced lies.
Time waits, you always told us you'd build us all a new Jerusalem, yeah. You talk the talk, but when you walk, you only leave a crooked line there. And you don't see the trouble that's brewing, if all you do is just what you're doing.
That's right, yeah, we got an agenda.
To the 54 of you watching, if you're finding value in this, please consider encouraging people to sign up and subscribe to Red Wall and the Rabble. We have lost probably about 20-30 subscribers. They're not happy that they're not getting everything for £3. There's nothing I can do. Since moving here, in many ways it's not done me any favors, but I can't continue to operate the way I have been operating. So please do encourage your friends, family members, others you come across to support this work, because you're not going to get this analysis anywhere else. You don't get this analysis anywhere else. Let's be honest. If Tameside had this sort of analysis, I think they'd value it. But I'm not from Tameside, even though I live in Tameside, and I wanted to try and make a difference in the place I call home. So please try and encourage others to sign up. We're not doing well at all on subscriptions. And I'm sniffling a bit. I think I've got a sore throat. I feel like I'm coming down with a cold. I know when you can tell you're gonna come down with a cold. Give me 1 second. Let me blow my nose. Yeah, sorry, I'm blowing my nose and reading Evan. I suppose love being told to get a drink. Good job I stocked up on the way home. So I'm just checking if I've missed any messages. Someone else has tried to kill Trump again. So he'll do well to get to the election, won't he? I think it just shows what's going on in the world and what's going on in Oldham, and it's the same issue. We can trace it all the way up to the top, can't we? It's exactly the same. There are those in this world who would do anything and have done anything to try and silence people like us who not just disagree with them but have the means of communicating and mobilizing people lawfully, legally, to challenge their tyranny. I've used the word from the beginning, and I stand by it now, more so than ever before. It's tyranny. Thank you, Paul, and look forward to that coffee at some point, Paul. Do drop me a message during the week. I'm around, and I'll happily come into Brighton and have a coffee with you. I'm sorry, I'm looking for an email. Just give me 1 second. Dear Mr. Mayor, Mr. Buggertoff. I don't know how you pronounce his name, but by the time we've finished, everyone's just going to call him Buggertoff, aren't they? Buggertoff. In accordance with the Constitution, under Section 4A, Rule 3, 3.1c, the following councillors' requisition has been acknowledged and signed according by correspondence in their name. Motion. So this is what the extraordinary council meeting is about. You can't just bring them back to discuss. There's a motion to be voted on, people. And you're going to love this motion that's going to be voted on. I'll read it out for you. It is extremely concerning, given the Chief Executive of Oldham Council has already had his working hours with Oldham Metropolitan Borough Council reduced, and it seems is set to oversee Tameside Metropolitan Borough Council also. Buggertoff's new nickname, Bugger Off. Yes, Andrew, indeed. Councillors deserve answers as to what is going on and to end the flip-flopping of a chief executive who doesn't know whether he's coming or going. Oldham Council isn't in a good place right now, and it is clear our financial situation is less than robust. It therefore requires honest answers from Mr. Cafferel and the leader of the council as to whether he is staying or going. Oldham deserves a full-time chief executive who will focus on the matters at hand in Oldham. I mean, that's not even it's not even up for debate, is it? That statement. Oldham deserves a full-time chief executive who will focus on the matters at hand in Oldham. How can anyone argue with that? The leader of the council, Arud Shah, needs to explain why she thinks this is a good idea to the full council. Because without her thinking it's a good idea, it wouldn't be... I've got to this stage. And the council has released a statement saying helping local authorities, other local authorities, is what they do. Bugger off. You can't even help yourself. The council resolves to, so this is the motion. There's 3 parts to it. 1. Seek urgent clarification from Mr. Harry Cafferel and request that he explain his working arrangement to elected members and what role he will play in the running of Tameside Metropolitan Borough Council. So Cafferel has to come to the council and explain himself. 1. 2. That Mr. Cafferel will take questions from elected members for as long as is necessary, suspending the necessary standing orders to allow him to do so. That means Cafferel has not only got to explain himself, he's got to sit there and have questions asked of him that he has to answer. Remember, this is the most highest paid person in the town. What's the full-time salary? 150, 60, 70, 80,000 pounds as well. He's using it, our town, as some sort of paycheck some part-time hobby, some side hustle. So he's been brought to the council. So the extraordinary council meeting takes place. And when that extraordinary council meeting takes place, the first thing is they've got to vote on this motion. And there's two bits to it. First of all, is that Caffrell explain what he's going to be doing at Thameside. And then he answers questions from the councillors. Nothing unreasonable, nothing untoward. If you're an open, honest, transparent council. You ready? There is going to be, unless they block the motion, there is going to be a vote of confidence on Harry Caffrell, the Chief Executive of Oldham Council. Completely unprecedented in this town. A vote of confidence on Caffrell. I read the wording to you. That a separate vote of confidence will be immediately held following the vote upon this motion in Mr. Harry Caffrell continuing as Chief Executive of Oldham Metropolitan Borough Council. And this was signed off by Councillor Lewis Quigg, Councillor Luke Lancaster, Councillor Bethany Sharp, Councillor Pam Byrne and Councillor Dave Arnott. So, first base, the Mayor and Bogotoff have had to accept that Lewis Quigg has the right to invoke Article 4 and has successfully done so, and the Mayor has admitted to that, and now an extraordinary council meeting will be called. Secondly, at that extraordinary council meeting, but they've all got to attend, they've got to vote on this motion. Caffrell has got to explain himself, and after explaining himself, there's a vote of confidence or no confidence in Caffrell in his ability to continue as part-time chief executive, who then further becomes even more part-time as he splits his hours also with Thameside, which is a council in complete mess and disarray. Remember, Oldham does not have the capacity to backfill. Saeed Osman, a competent deputy chief executive, has left under a cloud because of the corruption and the cover-ups in this town. Emma Barton has been off for a sustained period of time, and she's a YTS, never operated at this level. And then you have Shelley Kipling, who's basically a comms lead from Manchester Council, who also has never operated at this level. The borough solicitor has just resigned. We've got Bogotoff on an interim basis, a personal appointment of Harry Caffrell. So there's no checks and balances to make sure whether he's got the legal expertise or experience. Well, he hasn't. The Director of Children's Services has left, remember? So that vote has to take place. So the motion has to be voted on. And this is when it gets interesting. We have already seen Mark Hinz and Lisa Navesey, Brian Hoban and Hindle prop up the corrupt administration of Arood Shah, even though this town, the borough, voted Labour out of control. The four independents who stood on a platform to remove Labour from power actually helped Labour Arood Shah prop up in power, and clearly they were bribed. They were given things in exchange. And it wasn't a CSE inquiry, was it, Markins? Because you've not got a public inquiry, have you, Hinsey boy? Yes, Gary, it's a fair point. Where was Graham Sheldon? I don't know. But Lewis needed 5 councillors, and he got 5 councillors. And I'm sure Graham Sheldon will vote with the Conservatives, as will all the other Conservatives. I'm sure that will happen. The question here, what you need to focus on here, first of all, is Mark Hinz, Mincy, Sieg Heil Nazi boy. The fake independent from Shaw going to prop up a part-time chief executive to become even more part-time and go and work in Tameside. Mincy. Because if Mincy does that, then what he's also doing is a vote of confidence in Harry Cafferel and his Muslim school on Tommyfield, the Muslim Academy, taking over public land on Tommyfield. Because that question surely has to be asked when Cafferel is called in. Why did you not declare your interest in Star Academies, the Tahidul Academy Trust, that was formerly known as? The Islamic school for boys, the Islamic school for girls. You sure, people? You will find out what Lisa Nafesy does. As for you in Failsworth, you'll find out whether Brian Hoban and Hindle are voting to keep Harry Cafferel in place. I've already been told from my inside sources that the HMR millionaire is away on holiday. So we'll find out if Cammy G and his boys from the sectarians rock up and whether they really are opposition or just another arm of the cartel like I've said they are. Remember, Shoaib Akhtar voted to help keep Arud Shah in power. Fake independent sectarian. Maybe there's an academy chain going on, Lee. Maybe they want one in Tameside as well. Hand over Ashton Market land as well to a Muslim school sponsor. What has gone on here? What has gone on here to get us this far is completely unprecedented. And for those who believe we're not operating, we're not continuing to work in opposition, we are. And we're doing everything we can. And we forced this. And you need to understand, at this extraordinary council meeting, it is imperative that the public gallery is packed. So we see what Mincy boy, and his Zig Heiling does. We see what Lisa Nafesy do. We see what Hince and Hindle do. And we see what the Pakistani sectarians do. First vote is on whether Harry Cafferel answers questions. Not unreasonable. And the second element of that vote is on whether, as a consequence of the answers he gives, whether the councillors feel reassured that the chief executive, the council, can operate and take care of Oldham. Again, completely reasonable. And I don't believe, as for the Lib Dems, I think the Lib Dems will support the first element. Gary, they've got to. Howard Sykes is up for re-election. The Lib Dems, at the last council meeting, stood up and criticised council officers for failing to get back to them. So the Lib Dems already are experiencing a council that is partisan. Council officers that are protecting the Labour Party and interfering in their democratic mandate. They've got to. Helen Bishop has to. But Howard Sykes has to, because he needs clear blue water between himself and Hinsey Boy. So yes, I believe Howard Sykes and the Lib Dems will vote for Caffrell to sit in the chair and explain himself. And I do believe that based upon what Caffrell says, they will all, including Lewis Quigg and Dave Arnott and the others, vote based on the evidence that's presented to them. They might vote and give Harry Caffrell a confidence vote. I'd be surprised, but they might do. But what we genuinely need, what I want to see here, bring them, because I think it's corrupt. I think it was a backhand appointment, and I think it's put in place a number of backhand appointments, including Alexander Bogatov. This council, the councillors that we elected on a mandate to clean up the town. Hinsey Boy and the fraudster, Brian Hoban, have already helped protect Harood Shah. Let's see if they help protect the chief executive, Harry Caffrell. Because there's an election coming. Time goes like this. 18 months, there's an election coming. And then a year after that, Hinsey Boy's up and Hoban's up. Hindle's up next time. The question you're asking, Gary, and the point you're making, is that the Lib Dems back off too quickly. And they do. But on this they can't. On this they can't. And that's the point, isn't it? Appointments must be appropriate. Procedures, they've got to be. Procurement, they've got. The fundamental problem with this town, or one of the fundamental problems with this town, is the backhand deals. The secret handshakes. They need to stop. Caffrell should never have been mooted or all but rubber stamped. It's like all but rubber stamped, isn't it? Always going to Thameside, it's all but rubber stamped. No. And no doubt he'll be getting money for going. And yes, he lives in Stalybridge. Okay, how are we getting on? How many people are here? Okay. I'll call it quits there. There's other stuff I want to go through, but we've run out of time. I'm trying to shorten these so they're about an hour, give or take. If you find value, please do share the work, share the information, share the analysis. Encourage people to sign up to Redwall and the Rabble or the Patreon page. A few people have got back in touch saying they can't get into Patreon. I don't know why. You can. You just sign up. It's there. I've checked. If you can't see the posts, it's because you're not signed up to the paid plan on Patreon. It's £1. There's something going on there, and I'll keep it for next week, I think, Gary, that I found not hilarious, but very predictable. regarding how Arud Shah's played Councillor Maggie Hurley. Yes, the council meeting will be live, Evan, and it will be open to members of the public. It's an extraordinary council meeting. Proper interviews, and see, you might want to also check the qualifications, I think, Paul. You might want to check the qualifications. Thank you so much, Marlene. Thank you for joining us this evening. Not seen you in a while, so good to see you on a live broadcast. I've been at this now for 6 years. You decide whether what I bring has value or not. A very, very good evening. Good night.
Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them. On the 20th of November 2003, James Ignatius O'Rourke McMahon was elected councillor for the Failsworth East Ward of Oldham. Deeply ambitious, he ruthlessly rose to power, and by 2011, he was already leader of the council. In 2015, exploiting a Labour Party loophole, he became MP for Oldham West and Royton. If only the people of the town knew then what they now know. Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them.